When you hear the word autism, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's a specific picture, right? One that's been shaped by decades of research and what we see in the media. But what if that picture is only half the story? Today, we're going to peel back the layers on one of the biggest, most overlooked stories in neuroscience. The thousands upon thousands of women and girls who are autistic, but often go their whole lives without ever knowing it. Let's dive into why this happens and what it tells us about the amazing complexity of the human mind.
So, for years, the accepted wisdom was that autism was pretty much a male thing. The stat you'd hear everywhere is this one. For every 3 boys who get diagnosed, only 1 girl does. But here's the thing, that number isn't just a simple biological fact. It's actually a clue. It's a breadcrumb that leads us into a much, much deeper mystery about how we see, and maybe more importantly, how we fail to see autism.
And that right there brings us to the absolute core question of this explainer. Is that 3-to-1 ratio telling us something fundamental about male and female biology, or is it the result of a massive bias that's baked right into the tools we use to diagnose it in the first place? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is a super fascinating mix of both.
To start unraveling this whole thing, we've got to understand that the classic picture of autism is fundamentally a male picture. This has led researchers to identify something they call the female autism phenotype. Basically, a distinct set of traits and behaviors that just don't fit that standard male-centric mold.
Okay, now this slide is where it gets really eye-opening. Look at the contrast here. The classic diagnostic checklists, they're looking for stuff like lining up toy cars or a really obvious lack of interest in other people. But in girls, it can look totally different. That intense, focused interest might be on something seen as more socially normal, like horses or a favorite band. And here's a huge one. Instead of avoiding social situations, they often work incredibly hard to camouflage their traits by mimicking their friends. The stress from all that effort, it often shows up on the inside as anxiety or depression instead of as outwardly obvious repetitive behaviors. So you see, the signs are there, we've just been looking for the wrong ones.
So why? Why are these signs so consistently missed? This isn't just a simple oversight. The reasons are woven deep into the history of autism research, our diagnostic systems, and yep, even our basic biology. It all starts with the very rule book we've been using.
The gold standard tools for diagnosing autism, things like the ADIR and the ADOS, they're the bedrock of the field. But here's the catch. They were developed and tested using study groups that were mostly boys and men. This means the very questions clinicians are taught to ask and the behaviors they're trained to spot are by their very design masculinized. They're just not sensitive enough to pick up on the female presentation. It's like trying to find a cat using a checklist written for dogs.
But it's not just about bias. There's a really powerful biological theory at play here too, called the female protective effect. The basic idea is that females seem to have a higher biological threshold for autism to become apparent. Think of it like a wall. For a boy to show enough traits to get a diagnosis, he might have to clear a 4-foot wall of genetic risk factors. But for a girl to show those exact same traits, she might have to clear a 7-foot wall. It suggests this kind of biological resilience that has become a huge focus for genetic researchers.
And that brings us to the really cutting-edge stuff. Recent breakthroughs in genetics are finally letting us look under the hood, showing us how these differences between the sexes might actually be written into our DNA, specifically on the X chromosome.
So get this, a massive genetic study looked at the DNA of over 15,000 people, and what they found brilliantly illustrates the biology side of this story. They didn't just find genes on the X chromosome linked to autism. They found that a lot of these genes have very different effects in males versus females. They even pinpointed new genes, like one called FGF13, that show clear sex-specific patterns. This is hard evidence that the biological pathways to autism can actually be different for men and women.
So we have diagnostic bias on one hand and real biological differences on the other. But what does this all mean for the actual women and girls living this reality? The science is fascinating, for sure, but the human cost of being missed, of getting a diagnosis late in life, is just profound. It leads to a lifetime of confusion, struggle, and sheer exhaustion.
For so many autistic women, the journey to the right diagnosis is this long, winding road that's just littered with other labels. As this chart shows, they often get diagnosed first with anxiety, or depression, or eating disorders, even personality disorders. So their distress is seen, right? But the underlying reason for it, their actual neurotype, is completely missed, sometimes for decades. This experience of constantly camouflaging or masking your true self takes an unbelievable toll. And this quote, it just captures the feeling perfectly.
this constant, draining performance of being normal. But you don't have a script, you don't have a director, and you don't even know you're on a stage. I mean, can you imagine how exhausting that would be?
And the inevitable result of this lifelong performance is a state known as autistic burnout. Now, this isn't just feeling tired. It's a debilitating state of total exhaustion from the years and years of stress that comes from masking and trying to fit into a neurotypical world. It can lead to losing skills you once had, becoming more sensitive to everything, and just not being able to function anymore.
But here's the hopeful part. Getting a diagnosis, even a late one, can be the absolute key to understanding and recovering from that burnout. It gives you a new framework, a new language for your entire life's experience. So how do you recover? Well, the approach is actually really practical and empowering.
The core strategy is this simple, two-pronged approach. First, you've got to reduce the demands on your system. Basically, you have to start taking things off your plate. And then, at the same time, you work to increase your capacity. You work on making your plate bigger and more resilient over time.
Reducing demands is all about getting strategic with your life. It means simplifying your routines, learning that crucial, life-changing skill of saying no and setting boundaries, and actively managing your sensory world with tools like noise-canceling headphones. It can also mean getting formal accommodations at work or school and outsourcing tasks that just drain you. It's really about creating a life that actually fits you instead of forcing yourself into one that doesn't.
And increasing capacity, that's the proactive part of recovery. This is where you learn to pace your energy, not just push through until you completely crash. It means finding ways to complete the stress cycle, like physical movement, to literally get the stress out of your body. And crucially, it means taking care of other health conditions, connecting with people who get it, and finally embracing your authentic, neurodivergent self.
Ultimately, what this all really comes down to is a massive shift in perspective. Recognizing the female presentation of autism doesn't mean we're throwing out the old definition. It means we're making it bigger, we're making it more inclusive, and frankly, more accurate. It means we're creating a world that understands neurodiversity in all its incredible forms.
And that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. When we expand our understanding of autism to truly include the female experience, it creates this incredible ripple effect. It gives a name, a validation, and an explanation to countless women who've spent their entire lives feeling different without knowing why. So the question is, if we commit to seeing autism more clearly, in all its diversity, who else, who is currently hidden in plain sight, will finally be able to see themselves?